And let me say, make a forecast as an economist, you know, if Trump sticks to the guns in the way he does at the moment, America will lose out, you know, and there will be new divisions of labor in the world. They will intensify, they will get closer, and with political consequences, of course. And America, you know, we can't help them if they deliberately take the risk of other divisions of labor developing without recognizing that they will be the losers. I can't help them. So this has to be a rephrased strategy in Europe to really look around in the world for appropriate partners, and I think many are standing ready. Europe is not without weapons in this respect, if I use the term weapon, which I don't like in trade, because everybody should be a winner in trade. But that's simply the fact at the moment, and this is why I would make a case for a two-tier strategy, but with more emphasis, if you like, on the constructive aspect of building new trade links.
Gunnar, we make a deal. You want to co-comment, add a sentence on what Professor Paqué said, and to do me a favor, you will combine it with answering a question I have for you. I read with great interest the policy paper you wrote last year on the Global Gateway initiative, because you are deeply involved in the predecessor model, which actually then resulted into the Global Gateway strategy of the European Commission and the European Investment Bank. What role do you see for the Global Gateway strategy to use it as a key instrument to bind countries like Brazil, India, South Africa, which are mainly Western-oriented, closer to us, and where in your view is there's room for improvement? Because when I'm in Brazil, and I have discussions where one of the criticism is always compared to the Belt and Road Initiative. China brings funding, China is fast, China is often the only bidder actually that is available. Europe is not even to be seen. What is your guidance now from an outside-in view, how we could bring more speed on the highway when it comes to the Global Gateway strategy, Gunnar?
Thank you very much. I'm still in my cooling off period, so I'm not considered to be from the outside commenting on these things. But first on what Professor Paqué said, it's not that the EU will now discover free trade negotiations. The EU has 76 free trade agreements and is negotiating a series of more. And that means, contrary to the United States, which has abandoned free trade negotiations since Trump won, maybe they come back to it, but that doesn't look like it. The aim is to finalize the negotiations with India, BRICS country, by the end of this year. Was just agreed at the highest levels. I hope the trade negotiators can fulfill that target. We negotiate already for 7 years with Indonesia, another important partner, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and Mercosur, of course, is the top prize now. And I think the German new government will have to reach out to our French neighbors to make sure that they are not blocking for agricultural interests of France, that very important deal. The question about Global Gateway, well, that's a very tricky question.
That's why I asked it.
The Chinese are specialists of offering to all kinds of countries around the world money, not development aid, money, which means investments for the fast construction of infrastructure, which serves Chinese interests, from the raw materials and their transport to port infrastructure, to electricity infrastructure. And and many other important developments, like, for example, digital infrastructure across Africa. They have been fast, they have been reliable, and they have been impacting, and the politicians of the countries in question are very happy in the first years because they can show that something's happening. With the Europeans, you have to negotiate over a long time the conditions for the engagement, and then at some point something is to be delivered, and it is never very clear how fast. And the Africans in particular, but also some Asians, are critical of that. I think we have made an effort. We are slowly improving, and we have now the Team Europe approach, which also you had referred to before, and that means that we operate together the EU level with the development aid with the member states, plus we add the financing possibilities, so in other words, also credits, both from European level and from national levels. And we have the firm intention to bring in much more private business. Until and unless Europe manages to bring in private business in these efforts, we will not win that competition with the Chinese, because they have far higher firepower. Since the BRI started in the year 2013, they have already invested more than $1.3 trillion. Our aim is to mobilize until 2027 300 billion euros altogether, EU and member states. So that shows to you the difference of firepower. The key difference, however, is that what the Chinese produce, invest, build, is done by Chinese workers and is done in a way that it significantly enhances the foreign indebtedness of the receiving country. So for many countries there are debt traps which are being created, like Sri Lanka knows a lot about this, for example, or some African countries, and we are trying to avoid that. But what needs to be done for us to be more effective is that we do a proper corridor and network planning, and that we significantly increase the speed between the identification of projects and the delivery of projects.
Nico, same question for you. Which opportunities do you see to bind the new member states, which are close when it comes to values and beliefs of Europe, closer to Germany, to Europe?
Well, I think Professor Paqué and Gunnar Wiegand have already said that, and I think is very important. There is the danger that with all the craziness coming out of the White House, we spend way too much time trying to communicate and trying to negotiate. All of this is important, but I think we just have to contend with the reality that for now, the US have said goodbye to free trade and globalization. I'm at this point not very convinced that whoever will lead the next administration will completely reverse that. Even if they did, it would probably be too late. So I think right now really is the time to look for other partners. And it's been said many times here today is that, maybe with one notable exception, the BRICS countries, all of them are very interested in trade, they're very open to trade. And I think there is now an opportunity because everybody needs to look for alternatives. There's some research that I came across yesterday by a professor at the IMD school in Switzerland, done before the yesterday's announcement. But his assumption was that even if trade with the US would drop to zero for every country, but assuming that the growth rates in trade with every other country would stay linearly the same, I think about 70 countries in the world would only take a year to sort of make up the loss of trade with the US, and then the others would follow next few years. That doesn't mean that that's not great. That's still, you know, sort of a few years of negative trade. But it also means that maybe we shouldn't completely overestimate the US's role. They're about 13% of global trade. That's not a little, that's a lot, but it's also not enough to, I think, fundamentally cripple the system. So I think we should really try to sort of keep an open mind. The problem is that may mean that we have to keep an open mind to find agreements, including with countries whose values we maybe do not completely share. I think that's the bind that European countries, I'm including Switzerland, even though we're, of course, not a member of the EU, we find ourselves in that if we want to expand our horizons as we should, we may have to, as the BRICS countries do, all the time when they meet, we may have to find ways to collaborate and talk to countries with which we are not perfectly aligned. I think that's just a reality.
Thank you. I would now like to open the floor. We have time for 1 to 2 questions. Who would like to go first? Remember the name, organization you represent, if any, who should answer the question, and don't forget the question mark.
Vielen Dank. Theresa Whitlock, mein Name. I'm sorry, I switched to English. I work for the Friedrich Naumann Foundation as well, and I would like to tie into this analysis that both Trump as well as the BRICS platform, or however you may call it, are very critical of the international system in their own ways. So my question is that will Trump and BRICS, and rephrasing the question of this whole panel, will Trump and BRICS accidentally reshape the liberal world order together? And maybe that ties into another question or another level of the question, which is, are they even aligned in the ways they criticize the international order?
Who would like?
Yeah, Switzerland, obviously, a very important and strong voice in international relations, so it's good that we have a seat at the table. No, I think they're absolutely not aligned at all. As you said, I think this is totally accidental in the sense that the BRICS countries, again, we have to, I think, maybe we should start talking about BRICS, because I think we always have to sort of exclude Russia here a little bit, which I think in some ways is not aligned. The other countries, again, it's been said many times today, I think have hugely benefited from the international order, have no interest whatsoever in sort of tearing it down and rebuilding it from scratch. They have what I think are partially legitimate concerns about their own representation, but their interest is to find ways for reform. And I think one reason BRICS exists is also because it creates more leverage to be able to sort of, institute those reforms. And I think that's drastically different from, I think there's really no other word for it anymore, the completely nihilistic view of the current US president, who seems to believe that every international, every multilateral institution is just out to get him. So I think they may accident in a way that I described before. I think Trump's actions may sort of give BRICS a little bit of a boost, and maybe that will help sort of implement some of the reforms that otherwise would have taken longer. But I don't think they're aligned. I'd be very curious to hear whether my co-panelists agree or not.
I think they are accidentally aligned in the damage they do to the international system. But they are not aligned in the objective, nor in the methods. President Trump is against others taking advantage of the US, whether these others are allies or non-allies or international organizations. While the commonality between the BRICS, and here I do include specifically Russia, is that they think that the US has taken advantage of the international system since 1945, and with it, its Western closest allies. And this has to be remedied. So they both feel aggrieved, but from a very different perspective. And they both want to change this. And I'm afraid that President Trump does not care if many of the international organizations of the current system would become victim of that, meaning wouldn't exist anymore, while the others want to reshape, rebalance. And for us Europeans, that's a very difficult, delicate balance now between these two radical approaches to work for reform and to save the system. But it's a real mission for Europe.
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings our panel already to an end. Our panelists have shared many insightful thoughts. I've noted for myself 3 key takeaways. First of all, keep the communication channels open to the US, but communicate, communicate, communicate. Second, we have good news from Gunnar that whoever will be the next German foreign minister or the chancellor himself will finally ensure that EU-Mercosur gets ratified and that France is no longer blocking it. And we will also make progress on the free trade agreement with India and the remaining ASEAN countries, because one thing is clear, we need new friends in the world. And thirdly, liberals can never be pessimists and are optimists. I would particularly like our 3 panelists for their insightful contributions. Nico, Luchsinger, Gunnar, Wiegand, and Professor Karl-Heinz Paqué. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. And I would like to thank you, the audience, first of all, for attending, for asking questions, and also for joining us via the live stream around the globe. If you need any more information, just a brief reminder that there is the policy available, copies in German and in English, so you can read everything in more detail what we have discussed today and way more. And you can obviously also, because we are digital, read it on the website of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation or also on the website of Table Media, which exclusively reported from the event today. And with that, I would like to hand over to Ms. Pomerenke for the final handover.